Bob's, where late-night food and drinks start at $4. Cheers to that. Limited time at participating locations. Offers, days, and times may vary. Drink responsibly. Void or prohibited. Tax and fees extra.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers introduced the two players they selected in last week's NBA draft. First-round pick Jalen Hood-Schifino of Indiana and second-round pick Maxwell Lewis of Pepperdine. Both players talked about the influence Kobe Bryant had on them when they were kids. Lewis's father, Robert, grew up in Inglewood. He put up a Kobe poster in his son's bedroom. Hood-Schifino has a tattoo of Kobe on his arm. Lewis and Hood-Schifino will be involved in summer league play with the Lakers' undrafted rookies and free agents. The Lakers are competing in the California Classic, which begins July 3rd in Sacramento. They head to Las Vegas July 7th for the 10-day NBA Summer Pro League. The Lakers have a decision to make today on Malik Beasley and Mo Bamba. Both have non-guaranteed contracts. If the Lakers don't re-sign them today, they'll be free to move on. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Help me. I can't do it all by myself. You got to help me, baby. I can't do it all by myself. You know, if you don't help me, darling, I'll have to find myself somebody else.
I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. So glad to have you tuned in this hour. I promised a rich and fun program today, and I think it's been that for these first couple hours, and here we are now in our final hour. I promised you on the backside of this hour a conversation with Morris Day. We just got word from Morris's camp that he has a family emergency that he had to attend to, and so we send out our prayers to Morris and his family. Hope all is well. I'm sure later today somebody will update me. But hope things are well with Morris. But we will not, in the back half of this hour, be joined by Morris Day, but we'll reschedule that immediately. He has a major event coming up, he and the time, of course, event coming up in July that we want to make you aware of. If you want to pop over to Vegas for a few days to hang out with Morris Day and the time, we'll tell you about that. We'll be get him rebooked. And there are some rumors I can't wait to talk to him about that he is set to retire this year after this tour wraps. So a great deal to talk to Morris Day about once we get him rescheduled. But our apologies again. Just got word that he is going to be unable to join us on the back half of this hour. But we will, I promise you, reschedule Morris Day on this program in the days ahead. Likely next week, in fact, or the week after. And we'll let you know when that is. But want to just bring that to your attention. In this hour, though, a conversation as scheduled at the top here about the fast-paced, technology-driven world in which we live. And in that world, cameras, as you well know, have become ubiquitous. Don't I know it? Everywhere you go, somebody's got a camera. Why? Because we all have phones. So camera phones have become ubiquitous, oftentimes capturing moments that are both mundane and moments that are extraordinary. Think about all the footage we've seen over the previous years that come from somebody just whipping out their phone right quick and catching it on camera. So the question is this: what happens when a camera is not just a camera? What happens when a camera becomes a tool for justice, a powerful medium through which marginalized communities and individuals can expose and confront systemic injustices? In his book, The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier, Phil Allen Jr. examines the transformative power of film and footage towards documenting and ultimately dismantling oppressive systems. This conversation was scheduled for 30 minutes, and now that Morris is not joining us today, we're going to take it the full hour. But trust me, I got more than enough questions to engage in what I expect to be a rich dialogue for the hour with Phil Allen Jr. Phil, good to have you on KBLA Talk 1580. Sir, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here and have this conversation with you.
It's an honor to have you on, and just know for the rest of your life, you can tell folk you sat in for Morris Day one day on on KBLA Talk 1580. No, so I'm glad we have an hour. There's a lot in here, and 30 minutes might not have done justice to it anyway. So we get a chance to just stretch out here. Let me just start with this. I'm always fascinated by persons who write books. I've written a few in my own career, but I'm always fascinated by people who come up with interesting ideas, pardon the pun, to train their lens on. How did this become the subject matter for you?
Yes, great question. Actually, it started off going to Sundance Film Festival back in 2019. I took a class for my doctoral program, which I'm nearing completion of now.
All right.
And I saw a film called Always in Season, and it told the story of lynching, and it connected it to a young man who was found lynched in North Carolina about 10 years ago now. And so much of his story reminded me of my grandfather's story, who was killed in 1953, and my family never received justice for that murder. And so the paper that I wrote was called The Prophetic Lens, and I talked about Dr. King's use of the camera for the success of the civil rights movement. He took advantage of the cameramen who were there to capture the violence and broadcast it to the nation and to the world. And so I was fascinated by that, and I hadn't really heard too much written on or spoken on how potent the use of the camera was for King, and decided to write this paper. But it wasn't until Derek Chauvin's trial, 2 years ago now? Derek Chauvin's trial, where I saw the camera as the star witness. The video was the star witness in that trial. And if it were not, I asked myself, if it were not for the camera, where would we even be here? And I said, I have to take this paper and expound on this idea and write this book. And so I did.
I'm glad you did. And I'm glad that you are nearing the end of that PhD program. I know that those PhD programs ain't easy to navigate your way through. So I'm going to congratulate you early on just nearing the end of it before you walk across the stage with your cap and gown. I know those PhD programs take a lot of work, so congrats on just getting this far in the program. But I'm glad you trained your lens on this. When you think about MLK and the way that he encouraged those cameras around him to share a story with America that it needed to see, what comes to my mind is the moment that the nation saw those black boys and black girls in Birmingham, as they called it then. Birmingham, Alabama, they called it Birmingham. When the nation saw those precious babies with water hoses being turned on them and dogs being sicked on them, when King wanted the nation to see that, and the nation, of course, had to come to terms with what they were witnessing in real time that was happening to black babies, it fundamentally changed the civil rights movement as we know it. That was a critical, seminal moment in the civil rights movement when America saw that. When you think about that, you think what specifically?
I think about ingenuity. I think about creativity. I think about the spontaneity, the presence of mind. That wasn't an easy decision to take advantage of the trauma, the violence, the death of these babies, and to project that.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. King understood America at that time, and some could argue even today, would not move, would not budge, would not be moved to want to see radical change, particularly in the South, and we can argue across the country. But I think to create that tension, to prick the conscience of America, I think about the presence of mind, the ingenuity at the time, the sort of creativity at the time to say this is what's actually needed. We have to respond this way. I mean, we can go back to Mamie Till.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
That's right.
To take something traumatic that we would want to keep private because it's so sacred, her son, and to say, no, I'm actually going to use this to confront those who have put the blindfolds on, who have turned away from, who've chosen to stay distanced from what we have to experience, what we have to live through. That took a lot of courage. And again, it's a prophetic move to confront America with its own violence.
Yeah.
While we grieve.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off. That's the key phrase. While we grieve. While we're grieving, we're confronting America with these images. When we come forward, I want to talk more about that decision by Mamie Till Mobley to put that picture of Emmett's head 5, 6 times, 7 times its normal size on the cover of Jet magazine. The decision that she made, along with Mr. Johnson, John H. Johnson, the founder of Ebony and Jet, that decision, of course, impacted the nation as well. As I said moments ago, when America saw these dogs and water hoses being turned on these babies in Birmingham, Alabama, that impacted the movement. And there's some backstory. Dr. King had some folk pushing back on him about that decision to let these kids out of school that day and to use them in that way. We'll talk about that, his decision, maybe to Mobley's decision, and a great deal more. Talking in this hour about cameras and how capturing these moments on film have really changed the course of history. The book is called The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier, who we'll also talk about later in this hour. You're listening to Phil Allen Jr. right now as we celebrate the blues during June, Black Music Month, on KBLA Talk for today.
I wake up every morning with the same thing on my mind. Yes, I need somebody who can love me all the time.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
The pandemic may be over, but many Angelenos could be at risk of losing the place they call home. It's important to know your rights as a residential renter in the city of LA. Did you know eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt that was due before March 31st, 2023? And that you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice, also known as an unlawful detainer. Learn more about your rental rights at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Moments like my daughter telling me a new joke mean a lot to me. But after being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, or MBC, which is breast cancer that is spread to other parts of the body, they mean even more. I take Ibrance, palbociclib.
Ibrance 125 milligram tablets with an aromatase inhibitor is for adults with HR-positive, HER2-negative NBC as the first hormonal-based therapy. Ask your doctor about Ibrance and visit Ibrance.com. Ibrance may cause low white blood cell counts that may lead to serious infections. Ibrance may cause severe inflammation of the lungs. Both of these can lead to death. Tell your doctor right away if you have new or worsening symptoms, including trouble breathing, shortness of breath, cough, or chest pain. Before taking Ibrance, tell your doctor if you have fever, chills, or other signs of infection, liver or kidney problems, are or plan to become pregnant, or are breastfeeding. Common side effects include low red blood cell and low platelet counts, infections, tiredness, nausea, sore mouth, abnormalities in liver blood tests, diarrhea, hair thinning or loss, vomiting, rash, and loss of appetite.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands for Unity and Healing. African Focus Incorporated is a nonprofit organization based in California that focuses on the growth and well-being of Africans all around the world. Their mission is to promote the well-being of people of African descent through knowledge and appreciation of one another by building a bridge of love and understanding. African Focus Incorporated strives for cultural, educational, and economic growth. They're the organization behind the African Family Induction Ceremony, African Goodwill Awards, African Focus Trailblazer Tours, African Dance Competition, and Showcase Los Angeles, Family Day, Good News Windows Microfinance Project, and more. To volunteer, travel with African Focus, or to attend one of their community building events, please call 310-676-7730. That's 310-676-7300. Or visit AfricanFocus.org. This is a diaspora-wide community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio. KBLA Talk 1580.
Well, have you ever woke up in the morning sometimes, just about the break of day? Well, have you ever woke up in the morning sometime, just about the break of day? Reach over and feel the belly, baby, where your sweet man used to lay.
It's Ray Charles on KBLA Talk 1580 as we celebrate the blues. Ray Charles did it all and did it all remarkably well. It's Black Music Month, the last few days of it at least. And so every day this month we've been featuring a particular artist and sharing the best of their musical library all 3 hours of our program. Today we've given you a variety of artists, as we will continue doing so until the top of the hour. A variety of artists today as we celebrate the blues, and so we've thrown a lot at you, from Taj Mahal to Ray Charles to B.B. King to etc., Nina Simone and others. So we're giving you some of the best of the blues soundtrack in this country. We continue, though, our conversation right now with Phil Allen Jr. in this hour. His book is called The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency from MLK to Darnella Frazier. Talking in this hour about the ubiquitous nature of cameras these days, but what happens when these cell phones, these smartphones that we use, capture moments that are extraordinary, not at all mundane, moments that end up really becoming tools for justice, moments that change the course of history. And so we'll talk again about Darnella Frazier a bit later in this conversation, but had somebody not been there recording the murder of George Floyd, just imagine how different that fight would have been, how much more difficult that fight would have been, and other incidents just like that, where thankfully there was somebody training a lens on the injustice that was happening in real time, And as a result, it's made life a little bit easier. It's not always that way. We saw the Rodney King videotape 30 plus years ago now. And that case did not end in the way that it should have. Justice was not done in that regard. So it's not always the case that just because a lens is trained on something, that the path, the road, the journey to justice will be that much easier. But oftentimes it is the case, and so we're talking in this hour about the prophetic lens. Not just the camera lens, but when your lens becomes prophetic. Again, we're talking about that journey from MLK all the way up to Darnella Frazier. Again, our guest is the author of the book, Prophetic Lens, Phil Allen Jr. So, Phil, we were talking moments ago about MLK and the decision that he made to use those babies. And I say use lovingly. I write about this in my book, Death of a King. There's a short piece in the book where I delve into this. But Dr. King knew that if the nation saw the ways in which those kids were being maltreated, it would fundamentally impact the movement. But there are a lot of folk who thought that was a bad decision. Folks who didn't thought that our precious babies should be put on the line in that way. And I recall having a conversation with Coretta Scott King years ago, God rest her soul. And she essentially shared to me, she and Bernard Lafayette, one of Dr. King's lieutenants, talking about that moment, shared with me King's belief and their belief that if you're young enough to be oppressed, then you're young enough to be on the front line. If you're young enough to be oppressed, you are young enough to speak out. And clearly, as you saw on the videotape, those young people had no problem. Some of them couldn't even pronounce the word freedom. They say, feed them. I won't feed them. I won't feed them. They couldn't even pronounce it correctly, but they knew what they were articulating. And so those kids had no problems coming out of school that day and letting the nation see them join the protest with Dr. King and others. But again, once that lens got turned on them and America saw that, it changed the conversation about the civil rights movement and hastened some meaningful and critical and seminal legislation in this country. So let me just start by, now that I've shared that story, let me just ask here initially what you make then of the power of the camera lens.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, when I think about that decision, my first thing that comes to mind is I don't know if there's any riskier job or riskier thing that we can participate in than to fight against social justice. Mm-hmm. And the diabolical nature of what we're fighting against requires risky counter moves, I should say. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm thinking how it formed a generation. Mm. I'm thinking how the message that you're sending, the courage that you're imparting to teenagers and kids, and the message you're sending to other kids who may be watching around the world, what does that say? How does that form the next generation to continue the fight? Mm-hmm. Rather than teaching them to shy away, to back away, you're teaching them to stand. So there is this risk, and I'm not making a decision as to what I feel about it here or there, but how are we forming? That's what I'm thinking about. How are we forming the next generation? We see it today in the BLM marches. Mm-hmm. Those kids on their parents' shoulders or walking hand in hand, and you could see them. Sometimes the camera was fixated on this one young lady. She's just marching, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace. How is she being formed to continue to fight when her parents don't have the same energy down the road? That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Much, of course, has been said about Mamie Till Mobley's decision all those decades ago to put Emmett Till's image on the cover of Jet Magazine, the Johnson Publications piece. And I had the occasion over the course of their lives to talk to Mamie Till Mobley about that decision. Mr. Johnson was a personal friend of mine. He and I had many conversations about his decision to put that photo on the cover of Jet Magazine of Emmett's head, 6-7 times larger than its normal size when they pulled his body out of the Tallahatchie in Mississippi. And Mr. Johnson confided in me that he thought long and hard about that. He knew as the publisher of Jet Magazine, the impact that putting that photo on the cover might have when the American people saw it. And he, as he shared with me, had, first, second, third, fourth thoughts about that decision. But ultimately, he was empowered to put that photo of him on the cover of the magazine because his mother, Mamie Till at the time, later Mamie Till Mobley, insisted that Mr. Johnson show the world, as she said, what they had done to her baby. But oftentimes, I'm pivoting here, oftentimes when people get certain images, there's a hesitancy, a reticence to even put that imagery out there because they know what's going to happen when they release it. Say a word about the decision by Mr. Johnson that he struggled with to make the decision to put that photo on the cover. What do you make of that internal struggle that he had to do so?
I think it's appropriate. Again, it's not an easy decision to put that such a traumatizing picture on the cover, but I remember seeing it as a kid, obviously decades later, but I saw myself. I saw potentially me in that casket. So the impact that it had on me was, it angered me, it scared me a bit, but it moved me. Like I felt it in my body. And I think he made the right decision, or she insisted on him doing that was the right thing, because based on what was happening during that era, it needed to shock us. It needed to scare us. It needed to be a bit traumatizing for the nation. That's the only way we would move. That's the only way things would change. It needed to be something that confronted those who, again, had their blinders on, who were distanced from it. It needed to confront them and make them feel it in their bodies like we had to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it was the appropriate decision. I think, yes, it's hard to see, but look at someone like me decades later as a kid who had to see that image.
Yeah, still
it
impacted by it.
Scared me. It impacted me to want to be redemptive in my work. Even back then, I didn't have the language for it. But
no, I get it.
Yeah,
we're just it's been several days now since our friend civil rights attorney Ben Crump filed a motion urging the release of police footage in the heart-wrenching case of yet another unarmed black man who lost his life at the hands of police in Wallace, North Carolina, located about 40 miles north of Wilmington. The case, of course, serves as a stark reminder that the struggle for justice continues and the significance of cameras in exposing such incidents cannot be overstated. We've conducted this conversation so far on this side of the aisle, as it were. I want to go to the other side of the aisle when we come forward. What we've been talking about is what happens when we train our camera lens on injustice, on oppression. When we come forward, I want to go to the other side. Police footage, police body cams. We're talking about cameras and how they capture moments. Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's them. But when it's them, we have to fight for them to release that footage. That's what Ben Crump is doing right now. In this case, it ain't the first or last time he'll be in a fight trying to force a police department to release footage that could change, in fact, the course of history. More with the author of the book, The Prophetic Lens, Phil Allen Jr., when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Mississippi, a group of Rankin County Sheriff's deputies who are being investigated for allegations of beating and torturing two black men earlier this year have been fired. The announcement came in a news conference Tuesday. Sheriff Brian Bailey, who said the decision to terminate the 6 officers was made after an internal investigation uncovered new developments. We're learning that more than $200 billion in potential COVID relief pandemic funds were lost in fraudulent schemes. A report by the Inspector General of the Small Business Administration shows that adds up to about 17% of the total funds, updated from previous estimates. Nearly $30 billion of those funds have been reclaimed to date. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Looking for a late night spot to get the crew together? 3 words, Buffalo Wild Wings. They've got drinks and apps starting at $4 from 10 p.m. till close. B-Dubs, where late night food and drinks start at $4. Cheers to that. Limited time at participating locations. Offers, days, and times may vary. Drink responsibly. Void or prohibited. Tax and fees extra.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers introduced the 2 players they selected in last week's NBA draft. First-round pick Jalen Hood-Schifino of Indiana and second-round pick Maxwell Lewis of Pepperdine. Both players talked about the influence Kobe Bryant had on them when they were kids. Lewis's father, Robert, grew up in Inglewood. He put up a Kobe poster in his son's bedroom. Hood-Schifino has a tattoo of Kobe on his arm. Lewis and Hood-Schifino will be involved in summer league play with the Lakers' undrafted rookies and free agents. The Lakers are competing in the California Classic, which begins July 3rd in Sacramento. They head to Las Vegas July 7th for the 10-day NBA Summer Pro League. The Lakers have a decision to make today on Malik Beasley and Mo Bamba. Both have non-guaranteed contracts. If the Lakers don't re-sign them today, they'll be free to move on. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
KBLA Talk 1580 is celebrating its 2nd year anniversary, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Always bet on black. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you faced discrimination in Los Angeles? The City of LA Civil Rights Department can help. They investigate private sector discrimination in LA City in commerce, education, employment, and housing. If you're facing discrimination, submit a complaint online for free at laisforeveryone.com. That's laisforeveryone.com or call 213-978-1845.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time-to-talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The Shadow Sister Tour is coming to Malik Books, Westfield, Culver City Mall, Friday, June 30th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Author Lily Mead will be signing and discussing her new book, The Shadow Sister. This book is perfect for fans of emotional suspense, sisters with stories with complex family dynamics, and speculative fiction, including hoodoo. Lily Mead's captivating book is a must-read, truly a page-turner. From the first line to the final page, the moderator is New York Times best-selling author of the book, The Black Kids. Come out to Malik Books, Westfield, Culver City Mall for the Shadow Sister Tour, Friday, June 30th at 7 p.m. There will be diverse books featuring strong female leads. Malik Books is a community bookstore that amplifies the voices of our community and gives voice to the voiceless. For more information, go to malikbooks.com. Again, that's malikbooks.com.
Hey y'all, Mona Swain here from Target's new YouTube series, My Cart is Full, where we feature Black founders and creators highlighting their connection to our community. As an actor and content creator, I love using my voice to inspire young Black women who look like me. When it comes to feeding my shine, seeing myself reflected in Black-owned and founded products at Target brings me joy. Together, we are Black Beyond Measure. Learn more at target.com/Black Beyond Measure.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
Hey!
Ain't no love in the heart of the city. Ain't no love in the heart of town. Ain't no love in the shoulder for pity. Ain't no love 'cause you ain't around.
Bobby Blue Bland on KBLA Talk 1580 as we celebrate the blues today. Almost out of days here in June, which, as you well know, is Black Music Month. And so we've been featuring different artists all throughout this month, all 3 hours of this program. Today, a variety of artists, a potpourri of artists. as we, again, celebrate the blues. We had a great conversation last hour with Dr. Lewis Gordon about the impact of the indelible imprint of the blues on African American culture and beyond. The influence of the blues on every genre of music is undeniable. And so we've been celebrating the blues all 3 hours of today's program. We continue our dialogue right now with the author of the book, The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier, Phil Allen Jr. We've been talking in this hour about the way cameras are just everywhere. They're ubiquitous, really, and the power that's pregnant in those lenses to capture footage that ends up changing the course of history. Think George Floyd, think even Rodney King. It did change the course of history. Nothing got done in the courtroom, but it impacted the way we see police brutality and police violence in this country. So it did have a great impact in that regard. I note that the officers who are charged with the killing of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, they were in court just last Friday. Of course, all pled not guilty, but thankfully there was some footage, some camera footage in that murder as well. And again, those officers were in court last week and will be back in court in the not too distant future, facing allegations of the murder of Tyree Nichols. And those officers, as you know, are African American, and so black folk, white folk, camera lens trained by us or camera lens on police footage. The camera is important these days when it comes to fighting systemic injustice and to fighting oppression. And that's what this book, The Prophetic Lens, is really all about. And I'm pleased once again to be joined by its author, Phil Allen Jr. So there you have it by way of update what we're doing in this hour. Let's get back now to the conversation with Phil Allen Jr. Phil, let me deal with this Tyree Nichols thing first, and then we'll move to the police body cam and the police footage that I talked about earlier, and the ways in which Ben Crump and other lawyers have to fight for police footage to be released. Which is interesting because everybody has said that one of the ways to address this are police body cameras. And then when you have them, you have to fight for them to release the footage. We'll come to that conversation in a moment. Interesting irony there. But what this Tyree Nichols case showed us, of course, in Memphis is that, black cops can be as bad as white cops when it comes to engaging in ways that we find immoral and unethical. In this sense, you have a camera lens that outs black folk, which is an interesting way to think about the power of the camera lens. How do you process that reality?
Well, the first thing I think about is power. And even when in my book, I talk a lot about white power structures, white supremacy. And to be clear, you can be a person of color and still operate in those same power dynamics.
No doubt.
You can internalize that, right? And inflict that. So the issue is not so much who's inflicting the pain. The issue is who's receiving the pain. And if those cops are inebriated with power and have internalized the power that's fostered within a white power structure, what is going to happen when they see even their own? It gives them an opportunity to do the same thing, to participate in that same injustice. So it doesn't surprise me at all. It didn't surprise me that they moved so quickly, and all these officers were arrested, except for the white cop who was on the scene as well. So none of that surprised me. I think we've seen that enough in history where those people of color, African Americans even, who have internalized the messaging and can be inebriated, drunk with power, and inflict pain. And we don't know where that pain might be coming from.
Yeah. The subtitle of your book is The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier. Tell me why it was important for you to highlight that name, Darnella Frazier, in the subtitle of your book, and of course to go into detail about her work and witness, as it were, inside the book.
Yeah, I felt like, one, the relevance of what she did bookending her being a bookend to what Dr. King did during the 50s and 60s with the camera, capturing the violence there. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to show the longevity. Like, this is not new. Like, what Darnella Frazier did is not a new thing. A lot of people think, what happened with George Floyd, people were so in shock. Well, let's go back. Let's trace back to Rodney King, and then let's go back to the 80s. Mm-hmm. Do the Right Thing was a story that was capturing what happened to a young man in New York, in Brooklyn. And then let's go back to the 70s, and let's go back to the 60s. This has been happening. So I thought it was important to put her name in that lineage, so people today could understand, the young folks especially could understand this is not a new phenomenon. Yeah. She is part of a lineage of this work.
Clearly, Darnella Frazier, as she said in multiple places, does not regret having shot the footage of George Floyd. Had she not shot that footage, then again, this would have been a much more difficult mountain to climb, so to speak. But I'm thinking about the ways in which, when you are the person who's training the lens on the injustice, you become a part of the story. Mm-hmm. You become a part of the story, and that reality fundamentally changes your life. Darnella Frazier's life was forever changed after she shot that footage. I'm thinking now of the immigrant who shot the footage of Jordan Neely being choked to death on the subway in New York. That he's been all kind of news stories, and starting with the question, why didn't you do something as opposed to just filming it? Well, filming it was doing something, and I'm glad that I'm glad we at least have that footage. I hope it will make it easier to successfully prosecute Jordan Neely, as Alvin Bragg, the DA in Manhattan, is doing right now. And I can give other examples of this. The guy that shot the Rodney King footage. I talked to Rodney King's daughter, I guess last year, on the 30th anniversary of the beating of Rodney King, and she was just telling me how she met the guy who shot that footage at one point and how it changed his life. I think he's now deceased. But the point is that whether you're Darnella Frazier or the guy on the subway or the guy that shot the Rodney King footage, when you train that lens, and we all do it nowadays, you don't know what you're going to capture per se, but you're taking a risk. You talked earlier about the risk that Dr. King took in using those students in Birmingham to come out so that the nation could, so the reporters could train their lens on the way that they were going to be maltreated in those streets with dogs and water hoses. And again, it changed the conversation. But again, talk to me about the risk that we take when we use our cameras to chronicle oppression and injustice.
Yeah. When I think about Darnella Frazier and others, I don't think so much about any of the backlash that comes. I don't think first about that. I think about her own internal narrative, having to watch, like she literally watched up close and personal a man die in front of her. And she had the presence of mind to keep the camera fixed on him and Chauvin. I think about what she's carrying. Like that's the narrative that I'm most concerned about, is what she has to carry for the rest of her life. Her publishing that video is her saying, I'm going to not only expose this, but also she's sharing the burden with the rest of us. Now we all are responsible for this, the weight of what she had to carry. So that's what I think about first, is the internal narrative that she has to wrestle with of what she saw. While everyone is applauding her, and rightfully so, for her work, she still has to carry that burden, right? The other part is embodying love. Her presence, I use the term prophetic all the time, her presence was not just prophetic, like being there and putting the camera out, but she didn't leave. The fact that she didn't leave, the fact that she didn't walk away, is love. It's her standing with George Floyd. That's the embodiment of solidarity.
Yeah.
Right, and that's all she could do was take the video, record the video.
Never quite thought about it that way. I say all the time, I always leave the studio smarter than when I came in. Never thought about it in that regard as the embodiment of love and her standing with George Floyd in the only way that she could at that moment. Certainly she could not get involved. You end up getting arrested yourself, get a beat down yourself, jumping in, trying to stop cops from doing what they think is their job. But to your point, she's standing in the way that she could, an embodiment of love with George Floyd. And I also, it's worth noting the point you made prior to that, which is that while we talk about what she shot and how that changed her life, I'm glad you brought me back to center, because what she actually witnessed was a black man being murdered in front of her. And there has to be some trauma associated with that as well. So I take your point. We're talking with Phil Allen Jr. He's author of the book, The Prophetic Lens, The Camera, and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier. When we come forward, I promise we'll get to this conversation about what happens when they train their camera on their injustice, oftentimes police footage. We'll talk about that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
In 2020, California established the first in the nation task force to study reparations for African Americans. Their responsibility is to examine and recommend to the California State Legislature potential remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans, with a special consideration for the descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. We encourage you to join the final meeting of the task force in Sacramento on Thursday, June 29th, starting at 9 a.m. in the first floor auditorium of the March Fong Yu Secretary of State building. To learn more about reparations and the task force, visit the California Department of Justice website at oag.ca.gov, where you can also get details about how to participate in the hearing virtually if you cannot participate in person on Thursday, June 29th for this final public hearing where the task force will present their final recommendations. For more information, reach out to Charles Communication Group at 888-326-0010. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Get ready to feel the funk with Charlie Wilson at the Hollywood Bowl on July 12th. Wilson brings 4 decades of hits like Outstanding and Party Train from his days as lead singer of the Gap Band and his award-winning solo career with hits like You Are and There Goes My Baby. In Vogue opens the night infusing killer vocals with class on hits like Free Your Mind and My Lovin'. Get your tickets now at HollywoodBowl.com. Hollywood Bowl, forever summer.
Ray Magliozzi here for eBay Motors. So you ordered a new air filter for your car. You try to install it, but it doesn't fit. So you take a little bit off the sides. What, still doesn't fit? Well, you could try to sit on it. Or get it right the first time with eBay Guaranteed Fit. When you see the check, you know that part's gonna fit. Air filters, brakes, headlights, over 122 million parts. Get the right parts at the right prices. eBay Motors, let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
All right, Phil Allen Jr., it's one thing for us to train our lens on oppression and injustice in hopes that something good will come out of it. And again, your book references and talks about Darnella Frazier. The book, by the way, once again, is called The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier. So we've talked about Darnella Frazier and others who've trained their lens on all kinds of injustice, but it's a bit different story. When the police, through body cam footage, train their lens, oftentimes on their own injustice, and then we have to fight, as Ben Crump is doing right now in North Carolina, to get these police departments to release the footage. So let me just ask a point-blank question. What do you make of that irony? And irony is the best word I can come up with, that everybody says that one of the ways to deal with police misconduct, one of the ways to hold police accountable is body cam footage. And then when you get the body cam footage, they take their own sweet time about releasing it publicly, if they ever do at all. And oftentimes it takes, somebody like Ben Crump raising all kind of cane to force them to release the footage. What do you make of that irony? And then we'll talk about the power of their lens being trained, again, oftentimes on their injustice and bad behavior.
Yeah. I think about Frederick Douglass and MLK when they both talked about power will never relinquish power on its own. Mm-hmm. And so this is a power move. When the fact that they said this is going to help the situation, this is going to hold police accountable, I think that was said to appease the public. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is this power move to hold or withhold all or parts of the video footage from the body cam was to give them time to create a narrative. Yes. So, because it's not just about the image, it's about the narrative that one can create to convince the public to believe their interpretation of events, the events. Mm-hmm. And so the longer we can withhold this, the more we can create this narrative, be on the same page, and then we can release, because it's a power move, we can release as we choose to release it. So I think that's part of it. The other part, though, I think the distinction between a Darnella Frazier and a police body cam is what it captures. Mm-hmm. The surveillance footage across the street, the body cam footage caught the images. The body cam was very intimate. It was on their bodies, sure. But what it did not capture was Derek Chauvin's posture. It did not capture his hands in his pocket. It did not capture the way his feet were, that showed how much pressure he was applying with his knee on Floyd's neck. And it did not capture his eyes. It took me 10 days to figure out why this video affected me so deeply, differently than other videos. It took me back 20 years.
Hold that thought. I want to hear what you discovered in that 10 days. I hear the powerful point you're making now about the difference in what we shoot and the way we frame it versus what the body cam footage captures and how it's framed. Clearly, it's framed from their perspective because it's on their bodies. But I hear the distinction that you're making between what everyday people shoot and what police body cams shoot. But I want to hear why it took you that number of days to figure out whatever it is you're going to tell us that you figured out when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Tired of being locked out of job opportunities and shut down by systemic racism? KBLA stands with you in fighting for the rights of black workers, and we don't black down. The Los Angeles Black Workers Center is a dynamic alliance of workers, organized labor, community-based organizations, clergy, students, and scholars, working collectively to improve the position of the black working class. The LA Black Workers Center takes a comprehensive approach to addressing the black jobs crisis. Their programs promote access to quality jobs, racial equity in hiring and retention, discrimination-free job sites, and they prepare black workers for employment in high-wage, career-track jobs. The Black Workers Center supports workers who need help protecting their rights on the job. They give workers access to quality jobs and remove systemic barriers to employment. To sign up for free career readiness training, get involved in organizing around anti-discrimination, learn about union apprenticeship programs, or sign on to a trade registry, please visit www.lablackworkerscenter.org. That's lablackworkerscenter.org. Together, we can beat the black jobs crisis. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, in downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Just enough time here, about 3 minutes, to hear the rest of Phil Allen Jr.'s story. So, Phil, you were telling us right quick about the difference in the way that we shoot stuff on our cameras and the way the body cam footage presents itself. But you were talking specifically about a 10-day period where you were trying to figure something out. Pick the story up and finish it for me.
Yes. So for 10 days, I believe, looking back on it, my body remembered, because our bodies hold memory, my body remembered an event from 20 years earlier that the cognitive part of my brain had not remembered yet. And for 10 days, I grieved. This video affected me differently than other videos.
You mean the George Floyd video, Darnella Frazier?
George Floyd video,
Got it.
yes.
Okay.
I would randomly be in tears. This funk and this heaviness was over me. And it took me back. And then one day I remembered being pulled over in my own neighborhood in Manhattan when I was living there. And I told the driver, my friend, get his badge number and name, because he wouldn't tell us why he pulled us over. The officer got angry, made us get out, started searching the car, and he told me, I can take you in for whatever I want to, and there's nothing you can do about it. And when he did that, he stood in front of me and stared at me as if he was provoking me, like he wanted me to flinch. And I refused to bow my head. I looked straight in his eyes and stared right back at him. And I saw, it was like I could see within him, his soul, the evil that was within this man. When I looked at that video and I saw Derek Chauvin, that's what I saw. My body remembered that look, but my mind had not connected the dots yet. And it took 10 days for me to remember that I too had seen that look. And that's what affected me the most. And that's what I mean by when we capture the video, when we take it, we intuitively will put that camera in places that the body cam footage without agency is going to capture.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And so that's the distinction right there. And that's why it's so important that we not be afraid, not get in the way and get arrested and intervene in that way, but that we do capture, we stand with those who are experiencing the injustice, and we capture what's happening and hold accountable and confront and then broadcast back to the nation what's happening.
Somebody said that if they ask you why we did it, tell them we did it for love. We did it for love. The book is called The Prophetic Lens, The Camera and Black Moral Agency, from MLK to Darnella Frazier. The author of that book is Phil Allen Jr. Phil, enjoyed this conversation immensely. Thank you for it, and all the best to you, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
My great delight. That's our program for today. Time to make now for the KBLA Midday Money Chain. Up next, the Millionaires Roundtable with Lynn Richardson, to be followed by Ahead of the Crypto Curve with Naja Roberts. Old money, new money. Either way, we got you covered here on KBLA Talk 1580. Thanks for tuning in, and until tomorrow morning, and as always, keep the faith.
In the world for you to have a loving from my baby's eyes. To see loving in my baby's eyes. To see loving in my baby's eyes. Loving from my baby's eyes. Late at night when I take my rest.
KBLA